Hello everybody, so today I'm going to go over how I set up this mist effect hub for the environmental effects series. We'll start by using Houdini to create the textures and then importing the results into Unreal. If you have any questions about the workflow or comments or any requests, please let me know in the comments below. Hope you enjoy the video. Alright then, let's get started. So for an effect like this, there are multiple ways of doing this. You can do it as just one frame, looping sequence, or even like 4 frames if you want. For this one, I'm actually going to do it into a generic texture and actually have it in a way where you can reuse it in different effects. So this is the beauty about Houdini. You can do a lot of things with just one simulation. So for this one, I'm just going to go over how I set things up. This is my own personal way. Like I've done it like multiple times, like even in the industry, like I would go in, test this out and see like what the result that I get from it. So one thing I would always say to keep in mind is don't go overboard with your simulations, because sometimes you can just push them a bit too far. You just like dial them down and just go step by step and change one thing at a time. Okay. So first off, I'm going to start with the geometry. So when you go into the geo SOP, here I am going to add a sphere, and this is going to be our shape. So you can start this off with a sphere, or you can actually deform the shape. And to do that, you do a mountain. And this will just add noise to the shape. And of course you can animate it or do anything that you want with it. This generally breaks up the shape of your simulation, which is a good thing because you don't want your smoke or your explosion to have a shape that is uniform, because that usually doesn't look good. Okay, so before that, I'm going to go and change this into a polygon. And increase the frequency to like, say 20. Should be fine. I mean, depending on how you want your shape to deform. Just gonna keep it to this. Okay, next I'm going to have my pyro source. And this is where you're going to, not the pyro solver. That's later. Pyro source. So this is where you set up your temperature, your alpha, color, when it comes to like what the simulation source is going to be. So this is really important. If you want your, let's say for example, if you're doing an explosion is going to have temperature, density, burn, and fuel, and velocity, of course. So these are the things that you're going to need here to add that into your simulation so you can get those results. For me, I just need density and temperature. So part of the reason I would need density and temperature is you'll see in a second. So when I add both of them in here, and just this, now I will have my shape. But I can't control the separation of particles. So what that means is I can't control how many particles are there because they are based off of the polygon here. And they are based off of the points. So to change that, instead of having keep input, which is the input to the pyro source, change it into surface scatter. So that way you can add how many surface scatters as possible, or you can just take them down. It's up to you. I'm just going to go with something like this, 0.05. That should be okay. Let's see. So next I am going to do a rasterize. volume rasterize attributes. So here's where you're going to add those attributes that you had. So the density and the temperature. Of course, you can see here that like it's just a big blob. I'm just going to clamp the coverage using the density and then decrease the voxel size. But before you do that, you might want to add your pyro simulation. So the pyro solver, and then attach it here. And part of the reason I say that is you see here, you have a voxel size right here, and then you have a voxel size here. So what you can do is to have them both, like let's say, for example, if I set this to 0.3, the other one is basically disconnected from it. So to actually connect the two, you can just go on the voxel size, right click, and then do copy parameter, go back into the volume size, the rasterize, and then go to the voxel size, right click, and then paste relative references. So that way, now they're both sharing the same value, and if you change it here, it will change here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is decrease this to, let's say 0.02, maybe 5 for now. Okay, so if I just come in here and then based off of me just changing this, I'm just going to play this. That's the result I get. Just everything going up. So for this simulation itself, I'm just going to go to the source and then kill the flames and kill the velocity because I don't need them. But what I will need is temperature and density. And part of the reason I say temperature, so if I kill the temperature here, my simulation is just in place. It doesn't actually go anywhere. You can't really do anything with just density. I mean, technically you can, but just for the sake of this simulation, you'll need temperature. So if I go to the fields and check out the turbulence, for example, and then add turbulence to it, nothing happens. But as soon as I check the temperature back here, now you also have turbulence. But back to this. I'm not going to need buoyancy because I don't need it to go up. I just need the turbulence in here. Because now everything is animated, especially the source. And now you have your turbulence. So technically it looks all right. You just need to tune it up a little bit. But the one thing that's a bit bothering me is the actual uniformity of the source. So I'm going to change that. After the pyro source, I'm going to come into here and then do a noise. So attribute noise and change this into a float. Now, if I view this, you can see that this is being affected by the color CD. CD is just basically an attribute for color, and it's a vector. So if I change it to a float and then delete the color and then add density. So now if I plug this back in and view it here, you see that nothing changed. But if I change the things here and add, let's say, for example, zero centered, like I can break up the shape more. So let's say I do subtract. So now this adds a level of complexity to this. And also I'm going to animate it. So now you kind of have two types of animation, but also you'd have to be careful because sometimes it goes into a weird way where, like here, for example, half of the shape is gone. So to fix that, I'm just going to add more here in the noise pattern. So I wouldn't have that issue. But like I said, now you have a different type of complexity, which is adding things on top of each other. So now, okay, this doesn't look bad. Sorry, it's a little bit slow because it's trying to cache this out. Again, the only thing we changed here is basically just the noise. Inside the simulation itself, nothing except turning off the flame and velocity and turning off buoyancy. So what buoyancy does is just kicks the, gets the particle, sorry, not the particle, but the simulation to go into a direction, which is up. For the turbulence, I did nothing here except for just turning it on. So here I can just come in, and if I wanted to change something here, and I implore people when they look at tutorials, use your own numbers. Like, for example, I have my own way of like setting things up. I know what they do. I know why they do this. In the case of somebody who's going in like fresh for this, please do use your own number. Like, for example, you liked a value, how something looks. Look at it again. What did you do? How did you set it up? That way it makes you susceptible to learning what things do. So for this one, for the swirl size, I'm going to turn it by half and increase this by 3. So now I have less, I have too much turbulence now, but I have less of a swirl in it. So now it looks a little bit more broken, and it has more of that, a little bit of turbulence. So to even add a bit more complexity to this, so you can add disturbance, which is going to shred it even more. So now if I get it back into here, and of course, it depends on what you're going to use this for. You can use it for mist, you can use it for kick-ups, you can use it for, like, if you're doing gun impacts or whatever. This is the way, like, I use, like, one texture to do multiple things, for example. All right. So I think it looks all right for now. I'm just going to tone down this. Maybe back to 1 and just change the seed and see how that looks. Yeah, it looks nice. Okay, so I know it looks a little bit pixelated, but once you actually get it into Mantra and render it out, that would look better. So let's see. Let's say, for example, I want to actually cache this out, so I can scrub through pretty quickly. You can do a file cache and just pick out folder that you want to set this up in, accept, and just save. Okay, so that seems to be good to go. So one thing about this that is a little bit like what you don't want to have is it's not looping. What you do want to have, that this is not looping, but you want it to have it looping. So there is a node called loop, labs make loop. And if I set this up, technically speaking, you just need to pick a good point where it doesn't loop anymore, which, hey, this doesn't loop. So this does loop. And now I don't need to change anything in here. But the one thing I will add in here is the pyro volume. And turn that on. Add a color to this. Part of the reason you want to just have this is because it'll allow you to actually look at it when you render. So if I had it just on the make loop and I tried to render this, so first you need to have a camera on the scene. So hold Control and click the camera, and you'll have this outline where you can just center your camera. Go to the view and just set it to 512 by 512. Then just get it as close as possible to your simulation. Next, you're just going to come to the render view, switch this to cam 1 and render. So now as you can see, at least like you have something in here. So let's go back into here. I think this would have probably needed to have more. So let's do 2 and just recache it again. So this is probably going to take a while. I'll come back when it's done. All right, that looks a bit better. Okay, so let's see. First thing, let's add a light in here, which I'm gonna do an environment. Oh, a skylight. So if you hold Control and then click on the skylight, you're gonna have light in here. So now in your render, you can actually see your details. Let's see. So here's an issue that you're going to encounter a lot. What you don't want to do is have this type of alpha, because when you're going to try and erode this over time or have it dissipate, this is the problem that you're going to face. You're going to get to a point where it gets to this degree where it just erodes completely through a big spot. And you don't want that. You want it to go from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0 throughout the whole thing. So one way to fix this is through a node called volume ramp. So when you add that in here, oh, right. Now you'll see your alpha when you erode it. This is how the erosion is supposed to look like. So, yeah. The one thing that's left is just to render it out and see if you like this. Usually before rendering out a simulation, I look at it through a play blast just to see like if there are any hiccups or anything, because usually, oh, that's not what I wanted. Just change the size here to 1024 by 1024. And do it again. So generally what I don't want to have is a big issue with this, for example, how it looped this way. That was weird. Huh. Whoop. Right. Now I understood. Yep, it's the looping. That's what it did. I think I know how to fix this. See, that's why I would do this first. To to see like how it would actually look like. But the simulation itself looks nice. I'm just gonna take this and just put it after the file cache, and hopefully it doesn't. Yep, looks good. So if I do it again, again, usually this is just patience. You need to have the patience for this, and you need to trust the process. Because if you rush things like this, it's like you're going to have to come back and fix it anyway. So might as well try it and do it right the first time. I don't think I need to worry about like what's happening here. I think that's only because of the lights. I might be wrong, but we'll see. Yeah, I think it's the shadows. So if I change the angle, again, you can skip over this part. This is just my sanity check here that I usually do. Okay, let's try this then. If I do it this way, don't think it's going to change anything anyway. Okay, I can just render it out. If the problem persists, I usually just come back and see what's wrong. Usually I just go by turning things off and see like if that fixes the issue. For now, I will show you how to render in Mantra, which you just go into the out. You have the Mantra node. Here you can actually just pick your frame range. So I'm just going to pick the whole thing and just render that out. A couple of things I would do is PBR for the rendering engine, allow motion blur, and enable depth. And also, if you want to like get rid of this based off of your PC, and this is also going to affect rendering time, you just uncheck this. So now you see like it is going to take a while, but just for the sake of this, I'm just going to keep it on and just render it. So let's see, that's the camera, correct, images. So let's do this. I don't want to type the whole thing, so I'm just going to copy it. Let's go to the D drive, geo, render, just do looping, smoke, accept, and render. So now we just wait for rendering. Okay, now that the render is done, I'm going to go into how to put it all together. So I'm going to go into the image or the comp section, and I'm going to switch to the comp view. And here you'll see this node. So I'm going to delete this, but usually it's the only node that you're going to have. So drop that down and dive in. The next thing that you're going to need is the file node. So what this allows you is to get the actual files that you have of your render. So now I have from 1 all the way to 240. So I think that's fine. So if you want to, you can just like make a completely new project and just import this in, just for the sake of like peace of mind, and nothing would no issues with the rendering, and sorry, no issues with the geo or anything on the project side. But I don't see any issue with it right now, so I'll be fine with this. So what I usually do in comp is I break it down into a couple of different things. So one, do I need to have this be affected by lighting in the engine? If I do, before this step, before I render out, I would set up a 6-point light setup, which here allows me to control the different channel through the channel copy node. So this node allows me to give the 4 channels different sets. So here I can say this is going to be R, this is going to be G, and this is going to be B, and this is alpha. For this effect, I'm not going to use that because I really don't need to do that. This is just for one thing, and it's just a piece of information for you to know. Like if you're trying to do a 6-point light setup, you would set it up here, and then you would render it out from here. So next thing I want to do is control the timing. So this is 240 frames. I want to compress all of this down to 64. So there is a node called time shift or time scale. So in the time scale, under length scale, select sequence length, and then set this to 64. What this will do is compress your sequence from 1 to 240 to 64. So now, once you get to 64, no more frames. So what I would do is I usually do 64, 64. That way I have all of my frames here. And for this one, I'm just gonna go back out and just kill all of it. I don't need to show anything. Okay. To actually make the atlas, I'm going to use a mosaic node. And this will give me the rows and columns. Don't forget, you need to have this on the first frame for it to work. Here is going to be images per line are going to be 8. So it's going to be 8 rows and 8 columns. And the max image frame is the max of the sequence, so it's 64. So you just wait a little bit. And now you're going to have your atlas. So one other thing that I'm going to do is actually do a crop. It's kind of weird, but I know this is the way I do it, and I know it's manual, but at least it gives me a peace of mind to what I'm doing. There might be somebody else out there that's done this in a more efficient way, but this is the way I've learned, and this is what I'm going to do. So what I'm doing here is trying to minimize as much of the dark space as possible. So what this will allow me to do is just so I can have the texture not be wasted. I wouldn't say wasted, but more of I don't want it to have much waste of space in there. Yeah, so that looks okay. I'm just gonna take this up a bit. Okay, let's see. I think that's it. I mean, the last thing you want to do is just do save frame. Just go into the format and open EXR. As far as the size, set it to other, and you can come into here and do 1024 by 1024. Or if you wanted to have a higher resolution, you do 248 by 248. And you're just gonna find a place to save it. I'm just gonna save it into here. I'm just gonna do under Houdini. Smoke. Yes, I called the folder that long. Next, I'm just gonna call this looping underscore smoke. And I'm just gonna render it out. So now that I have my renders done, I'm gonna import them into Unreal and create the mist effect. So go to the texture folder. I basically created a folder structure for myself. It's good to have. Import the texture. Just make sure it looks good. Yeah, it looks all right. Yep, everything is good. So if you want to like save on performance, you can always come to the level of detail and set the bias to 1. So this will cut it in half, or if you want to set it to 2, that'll go 512 and so on. For now, I'm just going to keep it at 0. Just for argument's sake. All right. So now I'm going to go into the material and make one called looping underscore smoke. So one thing I do want to do here is the same video that I did the emotes in. When the camera gets closer to the effect, it starts to kind of fade in the middle or like fade away based off of distance. And that's what I want to do for this too. Because like you kind of don't want the camera or the player to walk in there and still looks really hazy and everything. You want it like when you want it like it's in real life. When you walk in through the fog, you see what's in front of you, but you can't see, let's say 10 meters in and so on. It's not like too much in your face. It's not like really smoke that's emitting everywhere. So to do that, and I explained this in the modes video, you need a pixel depth, a sphere mask, and a 1- and a constant, which is if you hold 1 and left click, you'll get a constant vector. So put the pixel depth in the A and the constant into B, set that to 20, and when you look at it, yep, it looks right. I'm just gonna take the hardness down a bit and increase the radius for like 1500. So now I'm just gonna invert the result and review that. Okay, that doesn't seem to be bad. Okay, so I'm gonna add in the texture, call it looping smoke, and put a particle color with a multiply. So for the multiply, it's basically you hold M and you left click and you'll get the multiply. You're gonna need about 3 of them. So you're gonna multiply the RGB with each other and then the alphas with each other. this. And then you multiply the alpha with the pixel depth math. And then you take that into the opacity. So I know right now the opacity is grayed out. So to change that, just go to the blend mode. If you just click anywhere in the gray area, you'll see this. And then switch it to translucent. So if you back out, now you'll see it. If you get closer to it, it starts to disappear. And that's basically it. This isn't really complicated. Like I don't have like a 6-point light setup or a different texture to do everything in it. It's gonna be set to lit for now, default lit, and 2 sides. I'm gonna save this. So just like the mode effect that I did, this is gonna be like an infinitely looping effect. So to set that up, it's the same as the other one. It's just you want to have a good idea of the performance, and you want to have a good idea of what it's going to look like. So it's also trial and error when you're trying to make these type of effects. And depending on the lighting and what the time of day in your environment is. Call this looping _smoke. I'm trying so hard. I'm trying so hard to like spell things right, because like I have really bad spelling, and like it tripped me up every time not looking at the keyboard when doing it. Sorry. All right. So let's see. Okay, I'm gonna add the material in the sprite renderer. I called it looping smoke. So because I created an empty one, like I just do things from scratch, and because I created an empty one, this is basically, you're not gonna have anything spawn until you do a burst spawn on the emitter update. So I'm gonna do a burst, and I'm gonna set it to like 50 for now. And yep. Part of the reason it's disappearing is because of the distance, of course. Actually, I'm just gonna put it back to 10. You can go to the sprite renderer, and under sub UV, set this to 8x8. So now you'll have your particle, and do a sub UV blending. Oh, actually, you're not going to need the blending. Sorry. This is basically if you're trying to get a smoother blending between frames when it plays out. But I'm not going to have this play out. I'm going to have it spawn a random particle, a random frame every particle. So to do that, I will go into the particle spawn and do a sub UV texture animation, or sub UV animation. Change the sprite renderer to get the error to go away into a sprite renderer. And for the sub UV mode, you want it to be random. So now it will basically pick a random particle. And to show that, I'm just gonna change the size to uniform. And if I set a shape, location, set this to a box or a plane, and let's see, kill the Z, and do a, let's see, I want to spawn this on the surface. Let's see. Actually, let me do a sphere for now. Why is it not doing that? Maybe it's because Yeah, that's why. So the size of the particle was a bit bigger than the box. So every time it spawned, it would spawn still in the cluster. So to see it, I'm just going to add the particles into the world. Oh, and just a tip for an infinitely spawning particles, you might want them to set them to local space so you can actually drag them around without having any issues. So now you see, like, it basically has a different frame. But to even add more complexity to this, I am going to do random rotation. So every time a particle spawns, it will spawn in a random rotation. So that way you're giving that illusion of the particles being random. So now this does keep spawning. So to do an infinite life particles is kill particles when time has elapsed. That needs to be unchecked. So you'll see the infinity sign here. And then when you go to emitter state, you change that into self. Infinite, the loop behavior needs to be once, and then the loop duration mode needs to be infinite. That way you're going to have infinite particles in the world. So to add even more to this, I'm just going to add a rotation, like a small type of rotation. So there is rotation rate, sprite rotation rate. So if you see, the particles are slowly rotating, right? And this is what I want. That's it. Like, you can just set it up this way and leave it alone. But if you want to add a bit of randomization to it, you can have some particles spin and some don't. Some can go the opposite way. So it's up to you. I generally, if I'm doing something like this, I try to keep it a bit neutral. So -2 and let's say 2. And it will have a little bit of that flavor of it, like being random. It does move over time, and the player is not going to notice this in the world. That's the thing. There are some things I need to consider when taking a look at this, which is performance. How many particles do I have? How much is it going to cost me? And so on. And to check that, I usually go into the top left corner where it says lit, under the optimization view modes and shader complexity. See, that is a little bit too much. You're trying to stay away from it becoming a bit white. You just want it to be a little bit here, for example. So for this, first thing, I am going to go to the sprite renderer, and under rendering, where is it? Cutouts. Under cutout, there is a way to actually cut out the lines here. So that will give you a bit of room to wiggle with. Sorry, not the line, but the quads. So to do that, I'm just going to add the same texture that I had, which is the looping smoke. So what this is going to do, it uses the alpha to cut out the quads. So that's one thing. It does look a little bit too much still. So I can come here, either decrease it to like 5, for example, and increase its size. So one thing my mentor used to always say, less is more. So if you change, for example, the size and then change the amount, and you look at it again, yeah, it's a bit, it's not much, but if you set it up correctly, it would look really good. So let's do that. So now I've added like the stuff that I need to for the performance, or done the stuff that I need to for performance. I'm just gonna mess with it a little bit. So let's try and do it in a way that is like not too much. Okay, that's too much. So this is, let's say 800. Say 1000. 1000 looks fine, to be honest. Okay, actually I'm going to keep it this way. Next thing what I'm going to do is just decrease the opacity. So I'm going to go to the initialize particle and the color mode, just set it to direct and set the alpha into like 0.3 just to test it out. Nice. That looks nice. So that's part of it. What you can do is, like how I populate a level, for example, if I'm working on something, after I get this to look correct, performance is right, just for this, right? I will copy these and place them around the level. So here's another thing. Don't do the performance before you actually place them in the world. I would say finish placing everything and then do the performance when you get a profile of basically everything in the world. Make sure it's finalized before you start performing. Because here's the issue that you're going to fall into if you do the performance before placing stuff, right? You get to a point where your budget is going to be a lot higher than you think, and then you're going to ask to cut out even more. So part of the reason I did the performance before all of this is just to showcase that, just in case I forget. So yeah. All right, so let's take this and make another copy of it. If you have it in the world, just hold Alt and then just drag another one. Okay, it doesn't look bad. Okay, there might be an issue here. If you have noticed, like there's like a cutout of this, and typically when smoke or mist does that, it actually just does it in a way that is the depth is better. So to fix that issue, it is basically the depth. So I go back to the material, looping smoke, and under the alpha, what you can do is set up depth fade. Fade depth. All right. And when you save this, it should, in theory, fix that problem. Perfect. So now you won't really see it. Also, if I do look at the performance, it's not bad. Like there's just this right here, but other than that, doesn't look that bad at all. Okay. Oh, yeah. This is how I usually set up my stuff. This is not a big environment, but if this was bigger than this, if it was like open world or something like that, I'm more, I would say I have more freedom, but because this is just like a closed off scene, I'm just gonna start placing things around just to make it look good. And usually you want to set it up in conjunction with like a post process that you use to control the amount of fog, or not even fog, just the atmosphere itself. But yeah, this is how I would set this up.